Hey, welcome to Cohn and Hensley. I'm Grant Cohn. That's Ryan G. Hensley. I'm on the road. He's at home. Niners still didn't win the Super Bowl, although the narrative keeps changing in their favor, which makes it not so bad. I learned the last few days that it wasn't that big of a deal, and they really didn't make that many mistakes losing the Super Bowl, which makes me feel better as an analyst. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Getting over this illness, recovering from the 49ers loss. You talking about excuses you're hearing, I'm assuming, because for me, every time I hear more or learn more about the game, I get more and more pissed off.
Yeah. Well, let's look forward. Something else that could really piss you off. The Niners might trade Brandon Aiyuk. ESPN's Dan Graziano wrote today on ESPN Insider that he expects the Niners to trade Brandon Aiyuk, and it's the same logic they used to trade DeForest Buckner. They could keep Aiyuk. They could afford it, but they wouldn't be able to fill other holes, and they might have to lose players like Greenlaw and Juszczyk and Hufanga. But if they trade Aiyuk, they could keep all those guys, improve those weaknesses, and then draft another wide receiver to replace Aiyuk. Isn't that sort of the logic they used to get rid of Buckner? I don't know. What do you think? Do you see this happening?
Do I see it happening? I think it's a possibility with this 49ers organization. Should they? Absolutely not, in my opinion. It seemed like they shouldn't have. It was a mistake trading Buckner. Buckner, Aiyuk, they're both the kind of guys you just don't even think about trading. They do everything right in the offseason. They do everything right during the season. They're not scared to do the little things. They're not divas. Aiyuk is the best route runner, the best hands. He's the best receiver on the team. He's a willing blocker, which is hard to find from a wide receiver. He always comes in ready to go, in great shape physically. Trading Brandon Aiyuk seems like a mistake to me. It seems unnecessary also because, right, you could restructure him now, give him an extension, and it doesn't affect you for at least a year or so. It wouldn't affect them this season if they did that. And then they could move from Debo after this season. That's the way I would play it. I'd rather have Brandon Aiyuk long-term. He's younger. He's better. Restructure it. And then Debo can be traded not this year, one more year with Debo, but after that, you can move on from Debo. I think that's the plan I would take. Now, whether the Niners take it or not, I don't know. They shouldn't have traded Buckner, and they did. So it wouldn't surprise me if they end up trading BA. I definitely would not, though.
I think what's funny about this, I think they're going to trade Brandon Aiyuk, and I think it's a mistake. Just like I thought it was a mistake they traded Buckner. But I think you're seeing a lot of people right now saying, it's not going to happen. People who are covering the team. Not going to happen. Nothing to talk about. If it does happen, the team's going to have to give up a king's ransom to get this guy. If and when it does happen, you're going to hear the same people say, this was brilliant. This was the right move, which is so cynical and intellectually dishonest. It would be the wrong move, but I expect them to do it because they don't use him enough. If they wanted to pay Brandon Aiyuk, they'd throw it to him more. They can't really justify spending all this money on wide receivers and running the ball as much as they do. Like, they're 32nd in pass attempts this year. I don't think they ever expected Brandon Aiyuk to get this good. And I think they feel for the amount of targets they're giving to that position, they shouldn't be spending that much. That they could probably get a guy in a rookie deal and get 80% of Aiyuk's production for, a fraction of the price. That's what I think they're going to do. And I think what's interesting is, you could justify it. Maybe, if they get the pick right, it could work out. Like, they have a late first round pick. They could trade Aiyuk for a high first round pick, use that on an offensive lineman, and then take a wide receiver later in the first round. If they get both those picks right, they're geniuses, but they're not the greatest drafters. Well, they had 2 good draft picks the last 2 years.
Here's the thing. This is still a win now team, right? They have an opportunity to go after it again this year right now. And if you get rid of Brandon Aiyuk, who are you going to replace him with? I don't see anyone on the 49ers roster that can replace Brandon Aiyuk. And if they draft a guy to replace Brandon Aiyuk, even Brandon Aiyuk was in the doghouse his first year. Brandon Aiyuk wasn't Brandon Aiyuk his first year. So the odds of them landing another Brandon Aiyuk or someone as good as Brandon Aiyuk in the draft and also playing and reaching the field and having success is like slim to none right now. And if you look at what happened in the Super Bowl, Debo Samuel, 11 targets, 3 receptions. He was awful in this game. So to me, when I'm looking at this roster, I'm bringing back Brandon Aiyuk. I'm keeping Debo one more year. I'm making a run with those guys again. And then after this year, I'm moving on from Debo Samuel. They can't afford, like you said, in this offense to pay 2 receivers top end money like that, but they can't afford to pay one. And if I'm going to pay one, I'm paying Brandon Aiyuk, not Deebo Samuel. Is Grant frozen? There you are.
I feel like, didn't you learn your lesson from the DeForest Buckner, Javon Kinlaw thing? Like, it sounds great on paper. Hey, just trade this guy and replace him in the draft. But what if you get a guy who isn't nearly as good as Brandon Aiyuk? It's like Brandon Aiyuk isn't just a good route runner. He's also a great blocker. He's also really tough. He also knows the offense. He's also a team leader. He practices hard. You sure you're going to get all that from the guy that you draft? What if you get a guy who's got a bad knee or isn't nearly as interested in blocking?
Yeah,
I don't know.
They can't afford it. It's a no-brainer to me. Brandon Aiyuk, and I've been saying this for over a year and a half because there were rumors about it last draft. There are rumors about them trading Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk is not the kind of guy you traded. He's exactly what you want from a football player, particularly in this offense. He knows this offense. He's one of the best blockers that you can have at the wide receiver position in the NFL. He's not the kind of guy you trade. I'm telling you, the smart move is, now I don't know what the Niners are going to do, but the smart move is get him a new contract, keep Deebo, one more year with both of those guys. After this year, you find a way to move on from Deebo Samuel. That's what I would do.
I would think so too. And I'm gonna go further with this. So let's say the Niners. I just don't see how you keep both Deebo and Aiyuk. It's way too much money tied up in wide receivers on a team that doesn't throw. That throws less than any other team in the league. But if you trade Aiyuk, how would Purdy feel about that? That's Purdy's number one target. That's his favorite receiver. He says it.
Yeah.
So we trust the most. An older quarterback on his second contract who has more leverage and money and power would maybe speak up and say, absolutely not, I need this guy. Maybe not publicly, but privately. But Purdy's 24, Ayuk's 25. They should be playing together for the next 10 years.
Exactly.
They're, just like Steve Young and Jerry Rice were about the same age. I think Steve was 1 year older than Jerry Rice. Those two should be playing together. They're linked. Like, if anyone has to go, it's Kittle or Deebo. They're a lot older than Purdy. They're not going to be here that much longer.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think the way the contracts are laid out, even if you give Brandon Aiyuk a new contract this year, it's going to make it more affordable this coming season, and then your real problem is the year after that. But to me, that's Deebo Samuel at 30 years old, who's not playing like he was a couple years ago. That's when you move on from Deebo Samuel. You move on from him at that point. But BA should not be going anywhere. He is a staple on this team. In my opinion, you don't move on from Brandon Aiyuk. But here's the thing. That's my opinion. Would it surprise me if the Niners decided to move on? Not really. Not really, because they've made mistakes like this before. You see what they did with Buckner. And it's the exact same thing. You move on from Buckner, who do you get? No offense to Kinlaw, he's coming along great. Now, it's been like 5 years for him to get to this point. Who's to say that they replace Brandon Aiyuk with anybody that's going to be able to take his place anytime soon? It would be a huge mistake. I think if they move on from Brandon Aiyuk, it's the beginning of the end. I don't think they can make it back to the Super Bowl without Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, look, the Vikings traded Stephon Diggs, who's a lot like Aiyuk, and then drafted Justin Jefferson. If the Niners can get the next Justin Jefferson, everyone will be okay with it. But saving that, it'll be tough because Aiyuk, you trade him, but not Deebo. When Aiyuk does everything right, like Aiyuk never misses game. He missed one game in the last 3 years. He practices hard. He plays hard. He runs every route hard. He blocks. Like, that's the guy you trade, not the guy who runs half speed when he doesn't have the ball, or the guy who misses games every year, or the guy who's a little bit heavier than he's supposed to be. That guy stays. Like, what does that say about your culture? You don't reward the guy who does everything right and steadily improves? Why?
Yeah. It would make no sense to me. I hope it doesn't happen, because I don't believe, like, who's going to replace him? Ronnie Bell? I like Ronnie Bell, but he's not Brandon Aiyuk.
A rookie.
Who is
a rookie?
A rookie. And so that's a big if.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big if. If you hit on him, if he's good, if he understands the offense, if he's willing to be a blocker. You don't know any of those things. You can't take this risk. You got to keep BA around.
On the other hand, though, let's think about. Let me try to make an argument for it. If the Niners want to really invest in their offensive line, let's put it this way: the Chiefs would not pay Brandon Aiyuk.
True.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't have paid Debo either. They didn't pay Tyreek Hill. They're spending really nothing on their running backs and wide receivers. They spend on quarterback and offensive line.
Yeah.
If the Niners feel they have a special quarterback, protect him. And they don't have a pick high enough to get a premium offensive lineman. But if they trade Aiyuk, then they would. And that's, to me, the kind of a trade that the Chiefs would do. Trade Aiyuk, get an offensive lineman with that top 15 pick or something, if you can get that, and then try to replace Aiyuk in round 1 or somewhere in round 2. Possible.
Here's the thing. For one, you don't have Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy's not Patrick Mahomes. No disrespect to Brock Purdy, but he's not Mahomes. Their offense is a little bit more open. It's a little loose, right? With the 49ers, it's a very structured, rigid offense. Do this. You got to do this specifically. And if you don't do it, you're not playing. You got to block. You got to do all this. It's harder to find a BA that can fit into this offense and do exactly what he's doing than it is with the Chiefs, who you just need a receiver that can run routes and catch. It's a different
I can't believe
system.
I'm making an argument for trading Aiyuk, but just for the sake of conversation.
Yeah.
I think you could argue that it's harder to find great offensive linemen, especially for the Niners, to find great offensive linemen than it is for them to find excellent skill position players. Like you even put it out the other day. I mean, the Niners have had a really tough time finding good offensive linemen since they've been here with Kyle. Really tough time. Like the best guy they've drafted is Aaron Banks, who isn't a Pro Bowler yet.
Yeah.
Is he?
I think a majority of the problem that the 49ers have had in landing offensive linemen isn't that they've missed, although they have missed. They haven't prioritized it. They had 11 draft picks last year. Not one went on an offensive lineman. They could have got DeJuan Jones, who's going to be a hell of a player for a long time. He was available. They got
the one time they spent the high pick on an offensive lineman, it was the wrong one.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So they have to prioritize it. In general, you're right. It is harder to find an offensive line than a skill position player, but it's a little different with this system. It's very detailed. It's very specific. You got to do certain things a certain way to make Kyle happy and to get playing time. Brandon Aiyuk has gone through that whole process. He's mastered it, and he's the best receiver on this team. I think the 49ers have enough draft capital to go after linemen. This is a very thick offensive lineman draft class, especially at the tackle position. There are a lot of good players out there. If they prioritize and go after it, I think they can find that guy. They got to retain everybody they have and then find those depth pieces, because that's the thing is, I think we're going to talk about it later, but even if they nail it with the offensive lineman, what's the odds of him playing first year? Even Aaron Banks didn't touch the field the first year.
Well, that's why I'm saying, if think about it this way, I'm just getting Brandon Aiyuk out of town right now. Yeah. If they want someone who can start right away at right tackle, right away, and potentially maybe move over to left tackle and replace Trent Williams, who's getting kind of old and didn't play well at all in the Super Bowl, I mean, you're not going to get that guy most likely at the end of round 1. You're going to have to get that guy with a top 10 pick or a top 15 pick. And the only way you're going to get that is by trading Aiyuk or the head coach. You can do that. I don't think they will, though.
Yeah. No.
Or they could trade the quarterback. You think Brock Purdy's worth in trade right now? Just kidding. But seriously, what's he worth?
Brock Purdy right now? First round draft pick somewhere in there.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Mid first.
Yep. Yeah. I would think so.
They're not doing
He's probably worth more in a trade right now than Aiyuk, because you don't have to pay him and he's a quarterback.
Yeah, they're not trading Brock. They're not trading Kyle. That's for sure. And I don't think they trade BA.
Brandon.
I would be surprised if they trade BA. I really would. I don't think that's the move. I think this is, there's guys like Troy Fatanu from Washington. He should be available when the 49ers draft 31st in this draft. He's a really good player. I think there's going to be some good offensive linemen available when they draft. I don't think that's the right move. I think they're going to, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised, Grant, as much as we want them to replace the offensive line and upgrade the offensive line. It would not surprise me at all. And matter of fact, I expect it to be the same starting 5 that finish the season next year. Right.
I mean, so there's something to be said for that. Like, it's not like Colton McKivitz. It's not like any individual offensive lineman was just embarrassed in the Super Bowl. The problem was that schematically, the Niners couldn't get enough blockers on the field to pick up the Chiefs blitzes, and that's schematic.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
real quick, I want to
Agreed.
mention to people that I'm giving away a signed Christian McCaffrey jersey. All you got to do to get it is to go on Twitter, like this tweet that's on my page, follow me, follow Sleeper, the Sleeper app, which I'm going to be promoting in a minute, and go to the Sleeper app and then make your first deposit using promo code Cohn, COHN. You'll get this. You'll be entered to win this McCaffrey signed jersey. Just giving it away. Just wanted to let you know. If you want it,
That's nice.
the link is in the description. Check it out.
Very, very kind of you, Grant.
All right, so let's talk about this Niner O-line problem.
Yeah.
Everyone, all of a sudden, people are like, they gotta improve the right side of this offensive line. It's terrible. Yeah. It's the same issue in the first Super Bowl that they lost when they had Mike Person and Mike McGlinchey over there. Do you think what do you think the Niners could, should, would do about it?
Well, let's talk about what they should do. It's hard to predict what the Niners will do because they always surprise me, it seems like. What they should do is, and I think what I think they're going to do, I think the starting five to finish the season will also be starting to start the next season. But they should also be investing heavily in the offensive line for the future. McGlinchey's going into his last year. Brendel, I believe, is going into his last year. Burford, we don't know what's going to happen to Burford. Feliciano's a free agent right now, so I don't even know if they're going to bring him back, especially after he kind of threw Burford under the bus. I don't know how that's going to work out. But I would not surprise me at all if we get the same offensive line starting for the 49ers this year. But they really got to start thinking about long-term what they're going to be doing with this line. If they want to be competing heavily in the future, they need some studs, man. They really need some studs. They can't be okay with just mid-level offensive line outside of Trent Williams. Aaron Banks has had really good moments. He's a upper. He's like a B guard, in my opinion. But all those other guys are just kind of there, right? They're okay. Brunell's okay. Feliciano, Burford, they're okay. McKivitz is like, he's all right. You can't get by with that. This game is won and lost in the trenches, and the 49ers have been trying to get by and win Super Bowls with being okay on the offensive line, and it has not worked. They need studs. They need some difference makers out there, and that's been the biggest problem with the 49ers. In 7 years, Grant, only one has kind of hit, which is Aaron Banks. I mean, you could argue McGlinchey, but to me, that's not a hit. That's a miss, right? Especially for how high they drafted him. We'll see what happens to Burford. Maybe he works out. But in 7 years, really one good one, Aaron Banks, that they've drafted. They got to change that, and that's the biggest problem.
Well, the way I see it is like it's just an issue of prioritization. In the salary cap era, you can't be strong everywhere. I mean, you can be, but you have to decide where you want to make your biggest investments financially and where you want to save money financially. Every team makes that choice, that bargain. And the Niners consistently have decided to save money on offensive line and the secondary. I wouldn't do that. I would rather save money on the defensive line than the offensive line. That's just me. But until they decide, like, they're the opposite of the Chiefs. The Niners are saving money not only on the offensive line, but at quarterback. They won't be forever, but the Chiefs are the opposite. So I think with an offensive genius like Kyle Shanahan, who knows exactly what he wants, you don't have to spend a ton of money on wide receivers and running backs. You don't. Andy Reid doesn't. He's doing great things with Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice. That's enough for him. He spends on his tight end too. Yeah. Other than that, as long as the Niners are so committed to spending the most on wide receivers and running backs, they're always going to be weak at offensive line. Yeah. Always. It's the trade-off they expect.
Well, they don't prioritize it. I think most people, if you ask them, what are your most important positions on a football team? Most people will tell you number one is quarterback. Most people will tell you number two is protecting that quarterback. Not only that, this is a really run-heavy team. So it's not just about protecting the quarterback. It's about opening up the run game. If you had better offensive linemen, this run game is going to improve, which is a major part of this team. But even when John Lynch was interviewed, when he joined the 49ers, they asked him what their priorities were. Their priority was quarterback and then defensive line. They didn't even mention the offensive line when they asked what their priorities are for building the team. So it starts at the top, their philosophy and how they prioritize it. There's something about this team, about Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, that thinks they can get by with technique and schematics with average linemen. They think if you just get a really good left tackle, you're good. protect the blind side, you're good. Everything else we could figure out. That hasn't been the case. It's been a continuous problem for the 49ers that they need to readjust how they look at this team and how they prioritize. They need to get on board with the rest of the whole freaking NFL. Your second most important position on any football team is your offensive line, period, point blank. And it's time that the 49ers start treating it as such.
Yeah, trade Aiyuk for an offensive lineman.
I don't think you need to. I don't think it helps. I don't think trading Brandon Aiyuk is going to make that much of a difference. I think there's a really good – this is like maybe one of the strongest lineman class in a long time. There's going to be some really good offensive linemen. And I think no matter who they draft,
I fully admit I haven't dug into any of these players yet, so I just want to say that.
Yeah. There's some talented dudes out there, and I think they're going to be available at 31, and there's going to be some tackles out there. But the scary thing for me is on the exit interview, Shanahan again said, hey, we're not going to prioritize an offensive line, right? He literally said we're not prioritizing any position heading into the draft, and maybe that's a little smoke and mirrors, not giving away your hand. Hopefully that's what it is. But if they truly believe they don't have an issue at offensive line, you can expect more of the same moving forward. You can expect this 49ers team to do really well, go far, ultimately lose because of this offensive line. That's been the issue. They got blown up against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game last year, and they got blown up against the Chiefs this year.
They did.
It's the problem. You can't win.
It's the problem.
You
can't
win.
When the Chiefs lost the one Super Bowl, it was because of their offensive line. And they learned from it. They're like, we're never letting this happen again.
Right.
We are absolutely making this our number one priority. How come the Niners can't learn like that? It's been a huge reason why you guys haven't won your 2 Super Bowls. And you're just going to run it back with Colton McKivitz at right tackle. No offense to Colton McKivitz. He's doing the best he can. I have respect for the job he's doing, but can't you you have a 4th round pick and a 5th round pick who are overachieving on your offensive line. Can't you find some premium talent that add to the competition?
Well, it's because they do what they do. They do what they do. Yeah. They don't change. They don't learn from anything. Give me an example of something they learned from. Like, give me one example, Grant, of something they saw happen to them that ended their season, and they're like, never again. We're going to change that. Give me one example of that. I haven't seen one.
Well, okay, I'll try. I mean, they had Jaquiski Tartt drop that interception, and all of a sudden it dawned on them, like, oh, we need safeties who can catch the ball. So all of a sudden they're bringing in these playmakers with ball skills. Like, it seems like at certain positions they may make little tweaks, but at offensive line they're like, sorry, we just don't invest in this position. It's just not what we do here. Really,
it doesn't make any sense.
Imagine if you did.
Think about this 49ers team with Harbaugh's offensive line. Think about how freaking good they would be. Just ridiculous. I mean, you got to give it a
difference between Harbaugh and Kyle. Harbaugh doesn't mess around on the offensive line. Kyle does.
Yeah. I guarantee you Jim Harbaugh's going to go
around at that position.
I guarantee you watch what Jim Harbaugh does in LA. I keep wanting to say San Diego Chargers. But look what he does in LA with these Chargers. I promise you he's going to invest in that offensive line from the get-go because it's so important. Most people understand this in football. For some reason, Kyle doesn't think it's important. It's just we need a good left tackle, and we're good. It's not going to cut it. It's not going to be good enough. You've lost this team, Jed York. You lost 3 Super Bowls straight. You got to figure it out. You got to do something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. What you need to do differently is invest in this offensive line.
All right, let's do some sleeper picks. All right, here we go. I've been doing college basketball the last few days and just being really cynical, betting against, like wagering against these young men and doing really well because they're just terrible. I'm sorry, but we're gonna do some college. We'll do some NBA basketball, some NBAs today. Let's do Warriors.
Okay.
Start with Curry.
Who are they playing? They're playing the Lakers?
Playing the Lakers. It's going to be on Thursday. Got a few days.
Yeah.
With Curry, what do we want to deposit on? Points, threes, assists. You're good at this.
Yeah, hopefully, man. Let's see. The Warriors are my team I follow heavily. It's funny. They just tried to trade for LeBron James. Thought that was interesting. Did you know about that?
I didn't know.
They tried to trade for LeBron James for the All-Star
break. A little older. That's what's up.
Yeah, didn't get him. Yeah, we could do let's do threes with Steph Curry. What's the
5.5.
over on the 5.5? He's had 7 out of his last 5, 6
What's nice
games.
about the sleeper app, you can click right on him, see what he did. Last game 4, game before that 2, and then game before that 9, and then 7. Last 5.
Yeah, I think he's due. I think he did 9, 7, 7s. He had like 4 games of 7 in a row. I think he's due. I'm gonna go over 5.5 for Steph.
Okay. All right. How about Draymond? You can do points and rebounds, threes, double, rebounds, first quarter points.
What's the threes? What's the over-under on threes for Green? He's been hitting lately. Is that half? Give it to him. Yeah. He's at like 40% from 3 this year, which is
okay.
Great.
Wiggins.
What, 14.5 points
here? Huh?
Yeah. He's coming around lately. 14.5 points against the Lakers. What is points? 12.5?
Yeah.
I'll give him
over 19. Okay.
Yeah. What else?
All right, Kuminga.
18.5. Click on it. What's the show? I know Kuminga's been balling. He's been the best scorer outside of Steph lately.
He's been a little bit of slump the last few games.
Yeah. I don't know. Rumor is they try to trade Clay and Kuminga to LA for LeBron. So maybe Kuminga comes out. Yeah. Maybe comes out and tries to prove a point. I'll go over with Kuminga.
Okay. How about LeBron James?
What's that? What's that 1.5 I'm looking at right there?
Threes.
I'm gonna go over. He's becoming he's more reliant on his 3 than ever.
All right, last one, AD.
What is that half? What does that have?
Double. Will he get one?
Ooh. Never know, man. What's that half mark I'm looking at right there? What is that? 0.5. What is that?
Double. Will he get one?
A half a double?
Yeah.
Why not, man? Let's go for it. Let's go. I think he could do it.
We did 6 mores. It's all right. I like it.
Why not?
Yeah. Why not live life hopeful?
Probably won't win. Yeah.
Well, if you want to play, get the sleeper app, use deposit with code COHN, COHN, and get up to $500 deposit match on your first deposit. All right. Oh, wait, hold on. Boom. Tell me how Kyle Shanahan threw everyone under the bus after the Super Bowl.
Well, I think the first one's obvious, right? Firing Steve Wilks. Obviously, you're saying whatever he was doing is not good enough. So he threw him under the bus, right? They lost the Super Bowl. Steve Wilks gets fired basically the next day. You're putting the loss on the Super Bowl. Now, I think him getting fired was more of just a bad fit for what he wanted to do versus what Kyle wanted him to do. And they were talking about firing him. I reported they were talking about firing him at the bye week. So I don't necessarily think that was just about the Super Bowl. I think they're going to do that anyways. But the message is we lost the Super Bowl because of Steve Wilks, whether that's why they let him go or not, but that's what the message comes off as. So obviously Steve Wilks was thrown on the bus. But really, here's the thing. This is why I get so frustrated with Kyle Shanahan. This is why I come at Kyle Shanahan so hard. As a leader, as a coach, you have to take accountability. You know, I coached for a long time. I never coached the NFL. But one thing I always made sure I did is publicly, whenever we lost a close game, I took that. Hey, I say that's on me. I got to do better every single time. If I don't say that, if I say, hey, I think I did everything right, what does that tell everyone else? That tells them that I'm putting it on someone else. I'm putting it on the players. Kyle Shanahan not taking accountability publicly, saying he didn't do anything wrong. He wouldn't change anything. And you lost means that you're putting it on your players. Now, whether he says that to them behind closed doors
or your
or not, I don't know.
Coordinator who you fired.
Right. So you're throwing your defensive coordinator on the bus. You're throwing your players under the bus because you don't acknowledge anything, any mistakes that you made. And that's why accountability is so important. I swear, if Kyle Shanahan would just take more accountability, it's like Jimmy. Jimmy never took accountability. It was always we, us, right? But then I watched Brock Purdy come out. I got to do better. Takes accountability every single time. You're talking about a 23-year-old kid who understands the importantness of accountability at such a young age.
He's a better leader than Kyle right now.
He is. And that's why it's so important. I wouldn't come at Kyle nearly as hard. If Kyle came out after that game and said, I messed up. I wasn't prepared for this. I did this wrong. I got to get better. then I would believe, for one, I would believe that he understands what he did wrong and he can improve and get better. But for two, it's showing me that you're not going to throw everyone else under the bus. So him not being accountable pisses me off. If he would just simply say, hey, I was wrong, I had to do this and this better, I got to be better, I would believe in this team moving forward. But because he doesn't do that, I don't. It's hard for me to.
You know, they talk about culture in football. Sometimes it's unclear what that means. Well, this is part of the Niners culture. Kyle Shanahan doesn't take accountability for anything. He never says, this was my fault. So that sort of shows the top players on the team. If you reach a certain status, if you make a certain amount of money, if you're like Kyle, then you can pass off responsibility. And that's what they did. Nick Bosa messed up on the 4th and 1. And after the game, he said, yeah, well, I wasn't prepared for it. Like, yeah, I messed up, but that's on Steve. And it seems like if you're make enough money, if you're good enough, if you vacation with the head coach, then you can just pass it off and you're never going to be held responsible for anything. And it's going to fall down to someone who's not on that trip, not in that inner circle. There's an inner circle on this team. And if you're not in it, you could be scapegoated for their next loss. Be scary to come on this knowing you're not in that inner circle.
He pulled a Kyle Shanahan. You are the highest paid player on the 49ers. You are the highest paid defensive player in the NFL. And you're telling me you don't understand that your job is to set the edge? It's bullshit. You can't put that on the coach. Come on, that's what defensive edges do. Nick Bosa needed to admit that was on him, and he has to do a better job setting the edge and be aware in all circumstances. How are you not prepared, man? You've been playing football your whole life. That's a defensive edge's job. Just like with Kyle Shanahan, when he comes out and says that he didn't do anything wrong, that's bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit. Christian McCaffrey fessed up to it, took accountability. Brock Purdy fessed up to it, took accountability. There's a lot of players that took accountability. Spencer Burford came out, took accountability. But Kyle Shanahan's telling me that everything he did was perfect when it's obvious and blatant that it wasn't. It's absolute bullshit. And this is why if he continues to be this guy where I didn't do anything wrong, I'm perfect, well, I'm going to keep pointing out all the shit you did wrong. If he wants me to back off as a content creator, simply acknowledge that you are not perfect, you made mistakes, and that you see areas where you can improve. Until you do that, you're throwing your whole entire team under the bus, and you're making yourself look like an asshole.
Yeah, and it's like everyone knows your pattern now. Everyone knows you've been to 3 Super Bowls, and you blew big leads in hilarious fashion 3 times. So you could point to Steve Wilkes, but he wasn't on your staff in 2 of those Super Bowls. And I think it's becoming clear that what you do, Kyle, is you might do great in the regular season. You might get to the Super Bowl, but if and when you get to the Super Bowl, you're going to lose. And there's a high probability it's going to be your fault when you lose. Doesn't matter how good your team is. You're going to find a way to lose the biggest game. That's your legacy in the NFL until you win one. And so, look, it's great that you built this team. You've gotten a lot of opportunities. I think you've already probably blown a Super Bowl window. I would fire you right now and bring in someone I thought could at least win 1 Super Bowl and not completely squander this, because they're pretty close to having a rebuild. I think they got 1 more year with Juszczyk, Kittle, Armstead, that whole group, Hargrave. And then after that, they got to rebuild. So Bill Belichick's available now. I think he could win the Super Bowl right now with this team. And you'd hire him holding your nose. No one wants to work with Bill Belichick for a lot of reasons. But if you think he could win the Super Bowl, you owe it to your organization to bring him in. Sorry. Just get one.
You know who just kicked Kyle Shanahan's ass and wants that head coaching job right now?
Steve Spagnuolo.
He just came out and says he wants to be a head coach. He just kicked Kyle Shanahan's ass. And he did.
Hey, Jed.
The main reason why the 49ers lost.
He could bring Bieniemy with him?
The main reason the 49ers lost this Super Bowl is because Steve Spagnuolo outcoached Kyle Shanahan. It wasn't on Steve Wilkes. Steve Wilkes' defense held the Kansas City Chiefs to 19 points in regulation. If I would have told anybody, even all the people in the chat that disagree with me right now that love sticking up for Kyle Shanahan, if I told them before the game that the 49ers defense is going to hold the Kansas City Chiefs to 19 points in regulation, you would be thrilled and think the 49ers won the Super Bowl, because you would assume that Kyle Shanahan would be able to get his offense to score more than 19 points in regulation. But he wasn't. Steve Spagnuolo outcoached Kyle Shanahan, and that's the main reason why they lost the game. To set aside overtime, this game should have been won in regulation. Kyle dropped the ball in the third quarter when Steve Spagnuolo kicked his ass, multiple third and outs, no points scored in the third quarter. That's really when this game was lost. The overtime is another whole different blunder that was also on Kyle Shanahan. But Steve Spagnuolo won this game for the Kansas City Chiefs in the third quarter by dialing it up against Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan was not prepared, was not ready.
Yeah, so they have options. Spagnuolo's been a champion, not as a head coach. Jed York needs to be having these conversations. He should be talking to Eddie, Mike Holmgren, as many wise people as possible. What would you do? Who would you talk to? Would you fire Kyle? Would you talk to Belichick? Would you talk to Spagnuolo? What would you do? As opposed to just being like, I like Kyle. We get along.
What I would have done, and I got a lot of flack at the time, is if I was Jed York, I would not have extended Kyle. I said it at the time. I thought it was premature. There's no reason to extend him. He's in contract for this year and another year. So why are you extending him? There's no need to do that. I still haven't said fire Kyle because I need to find out who I would replace him with. But this notion that Kyle Shanahan is the only one that could lead this roster to success is bullshit. And when you suggest it at all, the quick go-to for everybody is, oh, what do you want, Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly? Well, Kyle Shanahan had the same record as Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly with this roster. It wasn't until they started building this roster that Kyle Shanahan started having success. Kyle Shanahan's success comes from a really good roster and a system that he got from his dad. That's where his success comes from. It's not his, it's the play design and it's the roster. It's not his elaborate play calling in game situationally that makes Kyle Shanahan good. In fact, he's bad at that. He's shown that he's bad at that at times. It's not his game management. In fact, he's shown that he's bad at that at times. So I'm not opposed to firing Kyle Shanahan, but I need to find somebody else that I would replace him with. The biggest mistake starts at the top. Jed York extending him 3 weeks into the season and saying that whether we win or lose the NFC Championship game, this season's already a success. Jed York has to set the standard higher than he has thus far. And that's been it's a big problem for the 49ers team.
Agree. Sam Wilson says, I got a bad feeling BA is going to be traded in the upcoming days. Buckner all over again. This is going to be a mistake. Hope I'm wrong.
I don't see them having success at all in a passing game. If they trade Brandon Aiyuk, this passing game is going to fall way off.
Yeah, they better draft a great wide receiver. He better be good right away.
Yeah.
Kaiser P says BA and JJ blocking are legit catchers. Debo, I trade Debo. Chris Groves, is it all possible we trade Debo post June 1st for an O lineman? Only a $6 million cap hit post June 1st. Tired of seeing Debo go half-ass all the time. I suppose it's possible.
I think what they do is they run it back. I think they run it back with Debo, and then after next season, they move on from Debo. I think they bring BA back. You know, giving them a new contract is actually going to make it cheaper for the 49ers this coming season.
Jose says, okay, they trade BA. Who do they draft? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out if they do it. Michael says, change is always good depending on if you draft correctly. We continue to bring back the same players. Do we really get over the hump?
I mean, that's the thing, right? If we just run it back, same guys, what is that? The biggest problem is this. Kyle Shanahan didn't do anything wrong in this Super Bowl, according to Kyle Shanahan. So he's going to come out. He didn't think he did anything wrong. So he's going to come back and do the same things over and over again until he admits publicly, yeah, I need to do this and this and that better. How is anyone supposed to believe that he's going to learn from it and do better? That's the basic reason why he needs to be accountable.
Michael says change is always good. Got you. Edgardo says BA Debo can't get open versus man. It showed in the Super Bowl. In Snead, McDuffie, back pocket all game. Trade to the Bears for that 9th pick. Bring in D Hopkins. Hell no.
Dude's old.
Hopkins. Nah, he's like 40.
Bro's dusty.
No. BA can get open versus man. Official BNA Music 88 says only SF will move on from BA and end up with Pettis 2.0. Could happen. I mean, this is the same team that drafted Danny Gray. Rafa Calderon says trade BA and draft another McGlinchey. LOL. Right. Yeah. SGA 1249 says could Kyle lose the locker room if BA is traded because he did everything Kyle wanted a wide receiver to do?
I don't know what's said behind closed doors, right? So if Kyle Shanahan is taking accountability behind closed doors, then it doesn't. He's not going to lose a locker room. But if he's taking that same attitude that he's taking with the media publicly, in regards to I didn't do anything wrong, basically he's putting it all on them. I think he's in danger of losing it sooner rather than later.
Agree. Corey Soto says, so our strategy is to hold on to stars as long as possible and to not retain young stars entering their prime and not give draft picks chances on the field. Essentially. Pretty well put.
Yeah.
Sean says, Kyle Shanahan feels like Purdy gives the Niners the best chance to win a Super Bowl. Then you extend BA. Trade Debo. Purdy will regress if BA leaves. Resign Juwan.
Yeah, I bet you anything. There's nobody that wants BA to come back more than Brock Purdy.
And Purdy. Yeah. Mel Miller says, only trading BA if it's to draft Trent's replacement. Tony Clay says, would you trade Aiyuk for Brian Burns, even swap?
No.
Niner Rob says, if we trade Aiyuk, I don't want a top wide receiver. I want Brock Bowers. Okay. Maritime Wake Gal says, you can trade Debo post June 1st for only $6.5 million on cap hit this coming year. The draft pick will be 2025 pick, but that's okay. No, it's not. You need something now. This is a Super Bowl team now. Chris Tallarico says Niners can get the next Hall of Fame wide receiver and still won't play them as a rookie. Never found out why he was in the doghouse. BA getting 1,300 yards with 30-second passing attempt team justifies keeping him.
Facts.
Yeah. Chris says, did they learn their lesson? Come on, that's an easy no. Size of P says to restructure focus on keeping BA, JJBP, O-line needs to improve, secondary needs depth. Yep. Tony Clay, would you trade Aiyuk for Brian Burns, even swap? No. Gold-blooded 30. You guys think Lance reunion would benefit both sides? Maybe hire Eric Bieniemy as OC. We need a big change. I feel like we maxed out with current team. That's not going to happen. And you know Kyle's never going to hire an offensive coordinator.
No.
Charlie Sinclair, so Jed York fires Jim Harbaugh because the goal was to win Super Bowls, but does Kyle still have a job? Why? Well, Harbaugh's a champion.
Here's the thing. Jed York is friends with Kyle Shanahan. That's the difference. They get along. They're friends. They hang out. Their wives and them go have wine together. That's the difference. If Harbaugh was friendly with Jed York, he would have never been fired. They just butted heads, different kinds of people. But all of a sudden, it's okay to lose big games with Kyle Shanahan because he's your friend.
Obi-Wan 49 says 100% agree with Ryan. Step one for Kyle Shanahan is to admit mistake.
Or else how do we know he's going to learn? We don't.
No. All right, we'll get to the rest of the Super Chats in a minute. Give me one thing Shanahan needs to improve on that no one is talking about.
So we talked about the offensive line and how it's a weakness for the 49ers. But what people really aren't talking about, now there are a couple of people talking about it. I think you've mentioned it. I've mentioned it. JT O'Sullivan has mentioned it a lot. But regardless of what players you put at that offensive line, if you don't fix your protection scheme, doesn't matter who you have there. The 49ers have a ton of free rushers coming at them constantly. There were 9 in the Super Bowl, 9 free rushers coming at Brock Purdy in this game. I don't know whether it's Brock Purdy's responsibility, Kyle Shanahan's responsibility, the center's responsibility. I don't know who is responsible for protections, but they got to figure it out because there were a ton of broken protection assignments. Even in the Eagles game, we saw what happened. They do not do a good job. It's like Kyle Shanahan basically in this offense expects defense to react to his offense when the vice versa is happening. The defense are like, we don't care what you're doing. We're coming at you. You react and figure out how to protect your quarterback. Kyle Shanahan, his offense doesn't do that. So I don't know if this is Brock Purdy being young and inexperienced and unable to adjust protections at the line of scrimmage. I don't know if it's the center's job, or I don't know if Kyle Shanahan just says this is what we do and regardless. But they got to figure that out. That's a bigger problem in this offensive line. You could have the best offensive line in the world, but if you're not going to adjust your protection schemes to protect your quarterback, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, it seems like Spagnuolo kind of cracked the code as far as how to stop Shanahan's offense. He couldn't pick up those blitzes.
Right.
So just getting like scapegoating Spencer Burford and drafting a new right guard isn't going to fix anything.
Right.
So again, we have to see Kyle Shanahan actually honestly look at himself and fix something. Yep. I don't know if he does that. I think it is interesting that Spagnuolo showed this, and it seemed like the Ravens showed it first. If you can sort of confuse the 49ers before the snap, and it's not Purdy, it's Brendel. It's the center setting the protection. If you can mess that up, you could probably get home because the Niners don't usually keep many people in to block. They might keep a 6th guy in to block, and it won't be McCaffrey.
Yeah.
That 6th guy they keep in to block, who will it be? Kittle? He's not great at policing the pocket like that.
Right.
So their whole answers to beating blitz on offense is getting the ball out really fast. Okay, well, if you play press man coverage and take away the quick throws right away, you got them. You can get free rushers with no quick throws. That's what the Chiefs did.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's like they have designated hots, and that the designated hot could be on the opposite side of the free rusher, and there's no adjustment being made pre-snap, right? Or even post-snap. They need to have multiple hots when you're getting blitzed like that. Like if you look at the third and fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, 3rd and 4, right? The real hot should have been Brandon Aiyuk. You heard Kyle Shanahan on the sideline yelling, Christian McCaffrey, who's on the right side. The blitz is coming from the left side. So the real he should have hit BA. Coach Shanahan's telling him to look to the right. Brock throws all the way to the left to Juwan Jennings. So it's all breaking down. There's no.
Well, you usually, I mean, that's the thing with Kyle. Like, throw to CMC. Usually, don't turn away from the blitz.
Right.
Usually, throw into the blitz because turning your back to the blitz is a good way to have a sack fumble.
Correct. Another part of this is, why are you going empty backfield with Brock Purdy and these weapons? You got one receiver that can get open, Brandon Aiyuk. None of these other guys are really getting open. Why are you going empty backfield? Yeah. And you're telling the defense, we're passing, bring it, and then you don't have an answer for it, or you don't have guys that can get open quickly. So there's a lot of schematic problems within this offense, particularly around hots and protection, that are going to be a problem regardless of who your offensive line is if you don't get it fixed.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the Super Bowl, Kyle kept going to these empty backfield formations, and I don't know why. They didn't seem to have any advantage, and it got them out of their identity. When he first came to the team, he was all about running and play action. That's not what empty backfield's about. So why are you doing that? Right. And it's killing your team. What are you doing? Because you like Brock Purdy? What about your offensive line? You only want 5 blockers? That's all you want. And you're just letting the defense dictate to you.
Or on the opposite side, you're running out of shotgun on the goal line.
Yeah. Since when and why?
So this whole like Kyle does design great plays, but it's like when he dials them up. But despite the plays being good plays, he's not thinking of protection. They're kind of just hoping that they get the defense that they want. If there's any other variant of that, they're screwed. Yeah. And that needs to be fixed. And that's a Kyle Shanahan thing.
Chicken Square 71 says trade Kittle, bring back JJ, let Young walk, restructure some contracts, and try to bring back BA, draft O-line. Bill B is okay too. I like the plan. King Geo says Spag didn't stop poop. Kittle didn't run the ball, but he had the lead every time the offense left the field. Get your facts straight.
Here, get your facts straight, King. Kyle Shanahan ran the ball over and over up the middle to right at Chris Jones, and Chris Jones was eating for lunch. The Chiefs' defense was their weakest is stopping the outside zone run. What did the 49ers do? They ran it right up the fucking middle, right at the strength of the Chiefs' defense. That was the problem. So get your facts straight, sir.
Joshua Wyatt, how long have I been saying Yorks only care about being relevant? Why do you think Jed took a victory lap? He knew what was coming and doesn't care. Whew. Chicken Square 71. Ronnie Bell is good too, and Gray. Is Gray good? Troll Heyman says, do you guys think Lynch sees through Kyle's BS?
I think he does. I think in that press conference when Kyle Shanahan saying, I like the thought process on every decision I made, I'm looking at John Lynch. He's looking at him, and I'm thinking John Lynch is probably like, bullshit, dude. Like you had some opportunity. That's my thought on it.
Michael says, Troy Franklin, wide receiver, Oregon, 6'3", 180, quick wide receiver, route runner, can get open. Brian Thomas, junior wide receiver, LSU, names to look for to replace BA if it comes to it. Okay. Obi-149, Kyle Shanahan treats the offense as if he's playing Madden. Joe Crowell says, we keep talking about the draft, but it's the rare rookie that makes an impact in the first year, especially on Shanahan's offense. Any player they draft is an investment in 2026. Man, that's true. Sean says, I bet there was more of a disconnect between the players in Wilkes versus Kyle and Wilkes. Why hasn't one player come to Wilkes' defense since fired? I mean, the way they jogged around the field, I think that's probably true. Scotty Dippin, seems like the prioritization is run blocking. Wouldn't there need to be a change in philosophy if they decide to go with a balanced O-line? What's Brock Purdy look like if he isn't throwing the least in the NFL? Well, he might throw more picks. I don't know. But to throw more, you need more pass protection. The coach says, I'm starting to get the feeling every player that gets Buckner never capitulated to Kyle as a man.
What's up, coach?
What's up, coach? I don't think Buckner did either. Brother, really, Kyle Bob says, what happens if Harbaugh wins a Super Bowl before Kyle Levy? That'd be hilarious. Mel Miller says, is there really 0% chance Kyle's on the hot seat? This overtime mistake can't be overlooked. Even Belichick was fired after his extension this year.
That's Jed's
Good
boy.
point.
It's Jed's boy. He's not on the hot seat.
Corey Soto, I might be dumb, but if we don't ever win a Super Bowl and Brock Purdy isn't it, I will always wonder where Lance would be now if they had played with him from the start. You're not dumb. T. Moss says, if we go for Rice Jr. on Hood, I say we go for Rice Jr. on Hood. Boxing Fan Times 4 says, if they're going to trade BA, it has to be for a team that has a top 10 pick. Draft Neighbors with that pick. Maybe Alt or Fashanu. Okay. Brother Bob, what our offense and special teams are perfect. Fire Wilkes. Yeah, why not fire the special teams coordinator? Chris Tallarico says, Ryan's correct. Those outside runs worked all game, especially to the left. Brother Bob says, I like OC and DC and Booth too, all 22 and adapt quicker. Kyle was in the booth when he was an offensive coordinator. Charlie Sinclair says, script says Chargers Niners Super Bowl. That would be a lot. That would be fun.
That would be interesting.
Tell me who the Niners should hire as a defensive coordinator.
Look, man, I got a young guy that I want to I think it should be D'Anton Lynn, Anthony Lynn's son. He was the defensive coordinator for UCLA. UCLA was consistently 80, 100, 120. Last year, they were like 10th or 11th under D'Anton Lynn. The USC Trojans just hired D'Anton Lynn. Anthony Lynn is his father, just got hired by the Commanders, so they got that relationship with the 49ers. I think this guy's good, man. He's he's only, 36 years old, 34 years old, something like that. He's a young, upcoming coach. He's done a magnificent job for UCLA. I think he's going to do a great job at USC, and I think the 49ers should snatch him and give him an opportunity. Will they? Probably not. They'll probably go in-house, but that's who I would start looking at. I've started looking at him and the differences he's made for every team he's been on, and I think he's a young, upcoming coach, and I think you'll see him in the NFL in a couple years.
I feel like this is a trick question because I feel like Nick Bosa is going to make this decision. Who does he? No, really, I don't think the players on this defense want to be coached anymore anyway. I think Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, they think they got it. They know. So whatever defensive coordinator, if it's the guy you're saying from UCLA, Anthony Lynn's son, he'll come here. He won't be able to bring any of his own assistant coaches, and he'll have to have some meeting with his players. Warner, Bosa, Armstead, they're gonna tell him how they do things. Here's what we call. And any time, so he's gonna spend all his time trying to placate them, which is what Steve Wilkes did. All right, I'll call it the way you want it. And then when something doesn't go right, it's on him. So I just feel like if they bring in an outsider, you're setting that guy up for failure, just like you did with Steve Wilkes. You don't want to create another Steve Wilkes situation because, as he just proved, you could average 17.5 points per game allowed all season and do a really good job against the Chiefs for 4 quarters and still get fired. So
it has to be internal. This is a name that I like because he's young, upcoming. I think he's going to have a bright future in the NFL. So he's a guy, honestly, who I would just at least interview if I'm in this process. But I think all the points you're making are correct. It needs to come from within. It needs to come from guys that they're familiar with because
that's too bad. Like, it should be the best man available for the job. But like, I don't think that Fred Warner and Nick Bosa will let that happen because they essentially don't want to be coached and they know better. So they'll bring in some guy who's their friend who won't challenge them and really empower them even more. And we'll see if then they want to run their hardest for 60 minutes a game. Because frankly, this effort issue, that should be something that Nick Bosa and Fred Warner handle. They should be setting the example, but they weren't. Nick Bosa didn't set an edge all season. And when asked about Chase Young not giving his all, Fred Warner was like, well, who am I to say it when I had effort issues too? Like, what? And then in the Super Bowl, the coach pointed this out to me on the phone a little while ago. How come George Kittle had to walk up to Chase Young on the sideline and have a little speech with him? Where was Fred? Nick? Where are these guys in the defense?
Yeah, and if Nick Bosa knows so much about who should coach him and who shouldn't coach him, then he should have known he needs to set the edge against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. right?
No, it
To
was Steve
say
Wilkes' fault, right?
I wasn't prepared it's such a cop out, such
Well, then
bullshit.
prepare yourself.
Right,
You're a
exactly.
pro, man. You make $34 million a year. What do you need Steve Wilkes to tell you what to do? That's why they pay you so much, right?
Wait,
Speaking of
who do
pay,
you think? Before we go there, who do you think they're gonna hire?
I think they're going to promote Nick Sorensen, their pass game coordinator, on defense.
Okay,
But they won't do it for a while. They're going to make it seem like they did an exhaustive search and turned over every stone, had a bunch of interviews, and they just, hey, this guy's the best. Then why didn't
Yeah.
you make him the guy last year?
right. Yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen.
Is Brock Purdy going to get paid? Last topic.
I was thinking about that, man. So after this season, he's they're eligible to, renegotiate, give him a new contract, but they don't have to. They could just let him play out his entire contract, which would be another year. And now Brock Purdy could just and after that, they could tag him. So the 49ers could really go 4 years, cheap as hell on Brock Purdy, and then tag him before they have to commit to him. But Brock Purdy has the option after this third year. He could say, I'm not going to play if you don't give me a new contract. I've been working for essentially free if you don't give me a new contract. It's going to be interesting. It's a conversation really for next year. But a lot of it's going to be determined on how Brock Purdy does. If he comes out and he falls off a little bit, I don't know if the Niners are going to pay him after this year. If he comes out and plays the same or better, then there's a good chance they do. But they don't have to. There's a lot of options available for the 49ers, and they don't necessarily have to pay him or give him a big contract after this season. What do you
I
think?
don't have to.
Yeah.
But frankly, the odds of him playing poorly next year are low because he's very good. Team is very good. So he could get hurt. But even then, I could see the Niners re-signing him. Maybe they'd save some money. I think they're going to re-sign him, give him a lot of money because that's just how the Niners are. They might, play money ball with Brandon Aiyuk or DeForest Buckner. But when it comes to their quarterback position, when it comes to their organization, they like creating the impression that everything is going according to plan and they have everything under control. And if they don't pay their quarterback, it makes it seem like they're an organization that's sort of in flux. They don't know. They don't have confidence. They like to project confidence even if it's not warranted. Yeah, we have our franchise quarterback. Let's pay him top market money just to show how much we like him. Like, yeah, you did that with Jimmy. You made him the highest paid player in the league after 7 starts just to show the rest of the league how stable you are and that you've arrived. That's so Jed.
Yeah.
So I would expect Brock Purdy's going to get paid a ton of freaking money. And we'll see how the Niners do building around that. It's not easy, but he still is a very good quarterback. I'm not saying they should get rid of him, but like you said, they could franchise tag him. There's all kinds of intermediary steps they could do to not go all in.
And I see things from both perspectives. If I'm Brock Purdy and I come out and play just as good or close to as good as I did last year, I'm demanding to get paid or else I'm not playing the next year. As much of a team-friendly guy as Brock Purdy is, he's been playing for as cheap as it gets. And so he needs to, after this season, if he plays just as good, if not better, he needs to demand that they give him a new contract. And I think they probably will. If they don't, regardless of what kind of team-friendly guy Brock Purdy is, he needs to sit out. I would. You're going to pay me. But this is another reason why they need to bring back Brandon Aiyuk, because this is a contract year for Brock Purdy. And without Brandon Aiyuk, I think he's going to struggle a lot more than he did this year. So Brock Purdy wants BA to come back more than anybody. And if he has any kind of sway within the organization, it's another reason why I think BA comes back.
Also, this is another reason why the Niners need to win the Super Bowl this season, 2024. It might be their the last shot of this window, because Purdy's probably going to get paid. And once he does, team's going to be different. They're going to have much less depth. You saw what happened to the Eagles. They gave a huge contract to Jalen Hurts, and look at them this year. They fell apart. They were an old team. So this could be the last dance. This could be the last opportunity. Then they may have to rebuild around a very highly paid quarterback who may or may not be elite. We'll see. So,
one thing we know about this team, Grant, is this coming year. This is the last year what this team looks like it does right now. This is their last opportunity to win a Super Bowl with the team the way it looks right now, because after this year, this team is going to look vastly different. So this is kind of the year to make a run with these guys.
Great. Chris Tallarico says, doesn't matter. We'll still be wide 9, giving up the long run to all third and long to a quarterback run. Yep. A true DC won't end up here. Look what happened to Wilkes. Yeah, they coached themselves here. Jewish guy says, did the Bills make any drastic changes during their 90s run? I don't remember that team well.
Well,
Maybe they should have. Maybe they would have won a Super Bowl.
I just posted it. If the Niners lose one more Super Bowl, they're going to get a movie because the Bills have a movie on Netflix because of their 4 losses in the Super Bowl.
Todd Tran says, lost too devastating. Only way to win Super Bowl is to reboot now rather than later. 90s Bills hung on too long. Niners are right about there. Guys, I got to run. Time for me to go do my thing out here. Good show today, though.
Yeah. Have a glass of wine with me for me, sir.
I certainly will. Have a good one.